Welcome everyone to What is a Complex Number, which is on page 7 of your notes. I want to say up front that there is an extra credit Edpuzzle or 2 available for this topic on the history of imaginary numbers. So if you are looking for some extra credit opportunities and you've already finished all the required work, then this is a pretty interesting video to watch. So it'll be on Edpuzzle for you. All right, what happens if you try to take the square root of a negative number? Well, we saw that on the previous page. We got a number called I. So I kind of came about because some mathematicians in the 1600s were trying to solve some equations, and they came across some that couldn't be solved because it involved square roots of negative numbers. And they thought that this was kind of an inconsistency, and they really wanted to have some way to represent the answer. So they decided that the square root of -1, they came up with a symbol for it, and they used an I. And they called them imaginary because at the time they couldn't imagine how these numbers would be used in the real world. However, now imaginary numbers actually are used by electrical engineers in their calculations. They use the letter J instead of I, but it's the same number, the square root of -1. So it's a little mini history for you, but these extra credit videos do have a much more thorough explanation. A complex number is part real and part imaginary. So they're going to kind of look like this. This is the real part. So this is any number that you have ever worked with in your entire life is a real number. It's going to be that part right there. This part is your imaginary part. Okay, so you got your real part plus your imaginary part. So first, we're going to look at how to take a negative square root and write it with an I. And then we're just going to look at different powers of I. Now notice that you don't have a separate assignment on this. Just your assignment here is this Edpuzzle. But you will have an assignment on adding, subtracting, and multiplying. So write each square root, negative square root with I and simplify. So what you're going to do is look at the absolute value of the number. So look at the 9. Well, what's the square root of 9? Well, the square root of 9 is 3. But this is a -9, so instead of just having it be a square root that the square is 3, the square root is going to be 3i. So the square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of that -1 that's there is the I. So then you're done, 3i. But then we have this one. So we have 4 minus. Now look at this part right here. What is the square root of 16? Well, the square root of 16 is 4. So that means the square root of -16 will be 4i. So your complex number here is 4i. 4 is the real part, and -4i is the imaginary part. Let me actually label that. Here's your real part. And here's your imaginary part. Imaginary, just like that. Now this one, sometimes you'll have one, these two right here, that if you just look at the 2, well, what's the square root of 2? Well, the square root of 2, the square root of 2 is 1.41421, blah, 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 it keeps going forever. So in that case, you can just put I square root of 2, just do it like that. So when you do number 6, which I'm going to make you try yourself, try to do it like that. All right, let's look at, you know what, I lied. Let's do number 6. I'm going to have you guys try those, but let's do this together. So 20. Well, what's the square root of 20? Here's the thing. You can kind of simplify this one. So 20 is 4 times 5, right? Well, square root of 5 is something nasty. Square root of 5 is this nasty number. Well, let's leave the 5 there. But what's the square root of 4? Well, the square root of 4 is just 2. So this is 2 times the square root of 5. But since I initially had a negative 20 and not a positive 20, I'm just going to put the I there. So I'm going to have 2I square root of 5. And there's my simplified version. Now, if you wanted, you could put this in your calculator, assuming you have changed the mode. In fact, let me show you again how to do that. Document, settings, document settings, and make sure that where it says real or complex, make sure it says rectangular, choose make default. All right, so square root of negative 20, and it will give you a decimal approximation. Cool. All right, go ahead and try those, and then come back to check. Okay, so for number 4, you should have gotten negative 1 plus 3i. So there's your real part and your imaginary part. And number 5, you should have gotten 9 plus 5i, and there's your real part and your imaginary part. Now for the powers, I want to show you a pattern, and then I'll show you the cheat way to do this. So the pattern is this. If you take I to the 0 power, you get 1. I to the 1 is I. I squared is negative 1. In fact, you know what? That's such an important rule that I want you to put at the top of the page. I squared equals negative 1. Box that in. We want that. That is very important for us to know. I squared is negative 1. Okay. I to the 3rd is negative I. And then you cycle back. I to the 4th is 1, and so on. So, I to any power is going to follow this pattern. 1i, negative 1, negative I, and then 1i, negative 1, negative I, and so on. So if you have a small power, you might want to just do it like this. If you have a big power, I to the 13th, well, calculator can help you cheat there too. So press the pi key, that's where you'll find I, right there. Choose it, and just tell it to do I to the 13th power. We'll tell you it's I. Okay, so go ahead and try those, the next 2 in your calculator, and come back to check. So you should have gotten 1, I to the negative 8 is 1, and I to the 57th power is I.